Thank you so much for being here. Really good to have you with us. You're here at the What's New in Simplifier.net and Forge webinar. My name is Bart Heijstra. I'm the product lead for all our data modeling tools here at Firely. And let's get started. Just a really quick introduction. Our goal for today is to share with you the latest developments in Simplifier.net and Forge, all the Firely data modeling tools. And discuss what is next, and also have an open forum for you to give any feedback, ideas that you have, requests. We really want to keep the line open. So anywhere during this entire session, please use the chat, please use the Q&A if you have any questions, and we'll try to address them either live or afterwards. And if this session is being recorded, we will share the recording, we will share the slides afterwards to everyone who was here or everyone who's a Simplifier customer. If you don't want to be in the recording, just make sure that you don't speak up. But we don't need to use your name if that's if you prefer not to. You can even ask questions anonymously. And yeah, the slide deck will be shared afterwards, so there's links in there so you can click them and get to all the latest features. We try to do this meeting every 4 months because that's kind of the cycle that HL7 also has with the working groups. I just came back from the Atlanta working group last week. So I'll also share a bit of updates from there. And then I have Matthijs and Rob with me here from the team, who will be demoing other features within this webinar. The contact details are here. You can send me messages directly there at Ward@Firely, or you can hit the support desk, Simplifier@Firely, or if you're a team or enterprise customer, you can of course use your Jira service desk to get the fastest response times from Matthijs and the support team. Okay, let's look at the agenda. In the introduction section here, I'm just going to quickly cover some events that are coming up and events that have happened, some reflections from the working group meeting that has just been, show a few showcase projects to inspire you what's going on Simplifier. And then we're diving into what's new and what's coming on Simplifier, stuff that we're working on right now, stuff that is being released already since the last webinar that we had in May. We're going to cover Forge, we're going to cover Firely Terminal, we're going to cover Simplifier. And then afterwards, we go on to the roadmap. We have a few features that we are working on right now and that we want to work on soon. And then there will be Q&A at the end too. But again, feel free to jump in at any time that you'd like. You can raise your hand, you can ask questions. So for everyone who's new here, just a quick recap. We're focusing here today on the data modeling tools for Firely. So that's the yellow cycle that you see here on the screen. It's where Fire data modelers come to build Fire data models, either with Forge or with Fire Shorthand. You can automate with Firely Terminal. And then once you're happy with the data models, you can share them in our cloud collaboration platform, Simplifier. So that's where you can work together with your colleagues to define a data model, to put the documentation around that, to publish it to the world. And so this is the cycle for Fire data modelers that we're going to cover today, that we're going to go way deep on. And this is also where your customers will find your data model, and then any implementers can take that into a Fire server like Firely server that Firely also provides. Make sure that you have a Fire API that you can actually start to build apps on top of, and start building interoperability showcases or exchange. So this is what we're focusing on. Firely also offers training. I'll come back to that a bit, and consultancy. So do reach out if you want to talk about any of the other topics, but today we're focusing here on the yellow data modeling cycle. Some events that may be relevant to you. So of course, in June, we had Fire Dev Days in Minneapolis. It was a really big event. Great turnout, a lot of focus on, of course, AI. I think for me, the takeaway was it's not ready to use in the regular healthcare setting in many cases. Mostly for administrative tasks, it can be very useful. But don't start relying in a clinical practice on it too much yet. But it is super interesting to talk about. Another use case, because we were in the US, you see a lot of those secondary use cases coming up, like measures and guidelines with the clinical, with CQL, clinical query language. I think that's going to come to Europe later too. So it's really interesting to watch that. We have another Dev Days coming up. I'm already skipping to the last one here. devdays.com, we have sent out the placeholder. So June 3 to June 6 in Amsterdam, put it in your agenda, try to convince your boss. I think we still have the convince your boss letter too. So try to be there. It's going to be very interesting again. So that's Fire Dev Days, and then of course we just came back from the working group meeting. In my next slide, I have a few takeaways from the working group that may be interesting to you. And then there's some other things going on. One thing that I'm considering going, probably will go, is here in Europe, in Brussels. There's 2 events going on. One of them is on the EHR Exchange format. So there's a lot of hype right now around the EHDS, the European Health Data Space. This is one of these working groups that comes together and thinks about what the concrete exchange formats need to be within EHDS. So I look forward to go there and learn what it's going to mean for the FHIR world. Then there's Hospitals on Fire User Day, also in Brussels in the same month. It's a bit long to stay over between them, but you may want to go there. It's run by really good people from Vierstein in France, and it's super interesting. If you're in a hospital working with fire, it could be really interesting to learn from peers there. Then there may be an HL7 Europe meetup, even before the HL7 working group in May. But that's not defined yet. I think that will be announced later. And then, of course, there's in January the virtual international working group meeting from HL7, and then Dev Days again in June. So some takeaways from the working group meeting, like last week in Atlanta. There were some new announcements on FHIR R6. Many people are looking forward to FHIR R6 because it may be kind of the new big adopted FHIR standard after R4. What you see here is the little schema with the balloting timelines. So this is not when you have it in your for you to use yet. Although we may provide early releases that may break at any time before that. But right now we're starting the for comment ballots, but only in 2026. It's assumed that the actual release will be. So nothing this year, nothing next year, but only in 2026 you can expect maybe the first version of R6 to come out. In the same vein, this is a slide that I photographed from US Core. I hope it's a bit readable, otherwise of course you're gonna get the slides, but basically they're looking to stick with R4 until 2026, 2027, and then make a gradual shift to with R4 and make a gradual shift to R6 at that point. So skipping R5. I think that's what we see from many organizations, like also in the Netherlands and in Germany. There's a few brave pioneers working with R4B, working with R5. I think we see them in Portugal and Luxembourg, in Estonia, which is wonderful. I think objectively, it's probably a better version than R4 because a lot of things have been fixed. And also the changes aren't so shocking anymore after R4, so it's probably still not too complicated to interoperate. But if you want to, like the easiest way to stay on what other people are using, probably R6 is a good thing to wait for. A few other technical things behind the scenes. Maybe some of you have noticed that the official FHIR package registry does not yet have US Core 7 and VSEC. This is happening because the latest versions of the VSEC FHIR package have been so big, they have been refused by the infrastructure. We're working on a solution. It's a lot of negotiating, but I think we have a path forward and probably will work on that soon. Let me know if this is something you're waiting on, then I can prioritize it accordingly. Another thing that the community really came together for, had some tough discussions on, is cross-version extensions. If that doesn't ring a bell, I see there's also brave R5 warriors in Norway. That's awesome. Medication definition, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Adam. Medication definition has changed quite a bit in R4B and R5, so I think that's a very sensible choice. Cross-version extensions is a standardized way that has been in the FHIR specification described for a long time, where if you want to use an element that was introduced with R5, but you want to use it in R4, there's a standard way to make an extension that basically reflects that element on your older resource. That has been described for a long time. There's even been some publications of those extensions before. But basically, we've always postponed the complex parts and the real difficult parts. And now, at the last working group meeting, they finally hammered out how to do those last complex parts. So I expect some movement in here soon. So if you still want to use some, let's say, medication definition in R4 in the way it's done in R4B or in R5, then there will be a standardized way to do that relatively soon. Some other things I'm following with interest is, as I already mentioned, EHDS, European Health Data Space, and HL7 Europe. There's a lot happening there, seems to be a lot of interest. As I said, there's a working group meeting maybe coming before May. There was just a kickoff last Friday from FHIR implementation guides for patient summary and hospital discharge reports, and also some base profiles for Europe. So exciting things happening there. Those were my takeaways. Then a few showcase projects. I just wanted to highlight two here. One of them is this National Health Data Network from Brazil. I'm probably gonna butcher if I would try to pronounce this. Goes to my wrong screen. There it is. I think what I like a lot is here that they use the README part or the project description here very creatively by using it really as an introduction to the entire project, and also a lot of pointers to other places where they have documentation. I think this is something we've been discussing with many people recently on when people land on my project or on my organization, how do I give them a nice pointer like, oh, if you're this kind of user, you need to be there. If you're looking for this kind of standard, you need to be there. I think this is a really nice showcase of how creative you can get with that markdown field within your organization or within your project, maybe even within your user profile, to help people find the right specification for them. So that's something I want to showcase. And then another one here is definitely not a new project, but a really nice project. And the reason I highlighted them here for the project from Gematik is because they are structurally the highest subscribed to projects, or the most bookmarked project within our system. So this is the e-prescription, the e-recept from Gematik. So really nice project, and it's definitely being recognized by other people within the system as being very valuable. And I was asking for the links. Let me quickly throw them in the chat here. There we go. Okay. So hopefully that's some nice inspiration for you. I've shown this slide before for people who have attended regularly, but I think it's really cool still. We have these two free trainings on our Firely website. So if you go to fire.ly/training, you can find a introduction to profiling course there, the left one here, which is free to use. You can just subscribe online, you get into our online course module. It used to be a bit hard to buy because you needed a VAT number even if you were like a student or didn't have an organization. That's now fixed, so it's way easier to access. Same for our .NET course if you're on the programmer side and want to learn programming with our open source .NET library. So these trainings are open for you to use. Finally, before we get to the new features, there are some recent news posts. The left one is from my LinkedIn account, and it's just a brief overview of like the different stages that you go through in a FHIR modeling project. So if you're interested in setting that up structured for your organization, please have a look at my LinkedIn. Then we always publish the latest features of the Simplifier releases in our Firely news on Simplifier. So you can find this from the homepage of Simplifier and also from the homepage of Forge, and find all the latest releases. So many things that I will discuss today, some of them have already been mentioned there. And then finally here on this slide, we have published the official report for the State of FHIR survey. So it's a yearly survey that we do via Dev Days to ask every country in the world that we have access to, where are you currently on fire? What's your regulation going on? What are the problems? What are the benefits that you're seeing? So we have made a report on this. We've made a blog post with some summaries, some highlights. So that's available on the Firely blog right now. And again, you'll get these links. They're all clickable after this webinar. Okay, off to the agenda, and then I'll stop talking for a moment and I'll pass it on to Rob, our Forge developer, about extensions on Elements. Sounds very vague, but we'll come to it in a moment. Firely Terminal after that with Matthijs, and then I'll come back with some simplifier features. Yeah, Rob, I'll be stopping my screen sharing so you can take over. And I think extension on Elements, it sounds very vague, but this is basically a broader definition of or categorization of a few extensions that weren't very easy to add in Forge right now. So they're deeper level. If you want to translate, for example, these are a few popular ones. If you want to translate an element, we could already show you the translations within Simplifier, but there's not an easy way to add them in Forge right now. And the same is true for obligations and additional bindings. So Rob is going to show you how you can add those soon within Forge.
Thank you, Ward. Now let me share my Forge screen. Hopefully you can see Forge. Right. So previously we were only able to add extensions to elements that were shown in the tree itself. Extensions of elements. And there was not an option there to add extensions on element properties. As Ward mentioned, translations or additional bindings or any other extension that can be used on any of these properties you could not add them via the user interface of Forge. I have two disclaimers to start with. First, this is still work in progress. So the final version may look or behave a little bit differently. And the second is that this feature will only be available to customers with a paid simplifier plan. Now, the way we want to visualize or add the feature for adding extensions is to have a little magnifier glass attached to each property. So if there's a magnifying glass, you can do something. For example, for value set binding, you have three options to show more or fewer details. You can add an extension, for example. You can either create an empty extension like so, and just paste the URL, or you can select an extension from the list. It takes a while. At the moment it's not filtered yet, so I'm just, I don't know, take one. So that is a way of adding extensions to different element properties. Maybe you notice that the color of the magnifier glass changes depending on whether or not there are extensions or constraints on this property. So for example, the color yellow. So if you're hiding the extension information, the color yellow means that there is an extension added to this value set binding. You can always visualize it. For description, for example, we have a shortcut button for translations. The actual user interface for adding the value for the translations is not there yet, but will come. So we have a shortcut button for translation extensions, and that will only be visible for those properties that actually allow for translations. We have sort of three ways of changing the way the element properties are shown. So this is, let's say, the standard version where you see the magnifying glass indicating where changes are. You can also have a shortcut key that will quickly open or close the information of all the properties. So in this way, we show the constraint properties where extensions are defined, but we can also show extensions that are inherited. So for example, on observation extension, there are two extensions defined in the base class. I think I covered for now the most important bits. Tell me if there are any questions.
Yeah, there are some questions actually. Great.
Okay.
One question that is not necessarily related to this, but if you look in the header, you see next to profile on observation, you see the little 5 icon there. What does that mean?
It's the maturity level of this
Great.
profile.
Yeah, great. I also forgot, but I think I see there's a nice mouse over. That's good.
Yeah, there's exactly. Usually there are tooltips available. So for example, also for icons describing what it is. And in this case, it also gives you a little bit information on maturity levels. There are tooltips on labels as well. For example, a short description gives you the fire specification or the description of the fire specification for this element.
Yep, wonderful. And then there was a question from Helma. In the search box in the window where you search for extensions, is that search box capable of text input and incremental search?
Well, there isn't a search box, but you can type, for example, if you're searching for an extension that starts with O, you can just type
the keyboard.
Yeah, so you can. So it's not visible, but you can actually type in this screen. So I started with PAT, so I get to patient or if birthplace. So there is a way to quickly go to the extension if you know the name.
Yeah, great. And I see Helma is asking about the filter button. I think I can take that one. Filter means that we are already filtering. So right now we are selecting an extension to be used on a specific element.
Right.
So what we try to do there normally is only show you extensions that you have in scope, like in the course spec or anywhere in your dependencies. Only show the ones that actually are allowed on the context that you're currently at. So that's what the filter button does. And then you can turn that off if you want to to add an extension that officially doesn't want to be there. But by default, we have that filter on. So if, for example, you're on a patient, you hit the add extension button, we only show you extensions that are allowed for a patient.
Right.
And if you turn the filter off, you see all,
At this moment, the filtering is not working yet. So you see more than is actually allowed for particular element definition.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna take over your screen and share again. Great. So if this was over your head, that's perfectly fine. If you don't need extensions on elements, that's perfectly fine. We see these are some newer use cases. Fire is getting more creative all the time now with being able to say more narrow things. Being able to translate an element, for example, into another language. You can do that soon with Forge, and then we can also in Simplifier, we will show you nice little flag icons with our translation icons where you can show the other translations. Same with obligations, that's a popular one, or becoming a bit more popular. Must support, always in Fire, has been a pretty vague concept. I think must support explicitly says, if you use must support, you need to define within your implementation guide what it actually means. And obligation extension allows you to be a bit more specific. Like, what I mean with this is, if the server has it, the server needs to send it. Something like that, there's code for that. So that's another extension you can use. And additional bindings is allowing you to besides the regular binding that you've put on an element, add some additional bindings for specific contexts or actors. So that's something in post R5 that's already added as an element on element definition itself. So you will see it automatically, but before that, it's an extension. Great. Thanks for the demo, Rob. I think then we're moving on to Matthijs, and Matthijs is going to show you Firely Terminal. Not necessarily new things that we've released, although we have released some new versions of Firely Terminal recently, but it's showcasing something that he sees a lot within his practice of helping people, and specifically on how you can use Firely Terminal within a pipeline on GitHub. So you can, for example, do validation there or translate Fire shorthand resources.
Yes, let me share my screen. All right. So as we've mentioned before a couple of times, and you can already see on Simplifier, we are always improving our support for Fire shorthand. We already have the Fire shorthand playground, and there's an option available in our bake pipeline to transform your fish files into Fire resources on package creation. And of course, the ideal situation would be that you would run Sushi on the upload of your Fire shorthand files, or that you can even live edit Fire shorthand files on Simplifier and save them directly. If you have any feedback on what your ideal situation would be, please let us know. But
And
until
we will get to those soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Until we have all these features available, we have created a GitHub pipeline which will do most of the work already. The GitHub integration is available for everybody with a team plan or an enterprise plan. And of course, that has the benefit that you can have your source code on GitHub and also have the benefits from Simplifier with all the securities that GitHub gives you. So you're looking at Simplifier at my demo project, which I've created. As you can see, I've already played around, so I've uploaded some resources and extensions. And you will also see that if I go to the text files, you can see the actual fish file still being here as well. But also the pipeline has created the actual resources for me here in JSON files in this case, but the actual Fire profiles. So what we've done is we have created a GitHub pipeline, and that looks like this. For people unfamiliar with this, in simple terms, this is a workflow of automated checklists that watches for new changes and updates to the repository. In here, it downloads the latest codes, it installs the tools it needs, including Firely Terminal and Sushi. It validates the data models using Firely Terminal. You also log into your Simplifier using GitHub Secrets, where you can provide your Simplifier credentials. And at the last step, it saves the actual resources which I've converted from Fire shorthands to Fire models. That's an option you can always turn off, but that's up to you. There's also a little grayed out area here where you can also install the Java validator. So you can run the Java validation in your pipeline as well. For the demo, I've turned it off to speed it up a little bit. As you can see, this workflow uses another pipeline, which is this one, which is a bit more complex. But if you know what you're doing, you can look around and you can see that here you determine which Firely Terminal version you install, which Sushi version you run. So you can update this to the ones that you need to the latest and work from there. Now, if I would open my own repository locally in Visual Studio Code, it will look something like this. I have my fish generated folder where I have the actual Fire resources. I have the input folder with the fish files. And I've set up a fish file where I will add 3 new profiles to my repository, which I will save. And then if I open my GitHub desktop, I see that I've made changes, and I will commit that to my GitHub pipeline now. For the observant users, you could have seen that when I commit to my GitHub pipeline, it will automatically run the pipeline. So if I commit this to main, I will push to origin. And then if I switch over to here, I can see in the Actions tab that there is a pipeline being run right now. We can also see what it's doing. So you can track where it's going and what it's doing and what it has done. So if anything fails in your pipeline for some specific reasons, it's an easy way to find it, and you can fix what was done. I had an issue with the incorrect folder structure for Fire Shorthand in the beginning because I copied it directly from Fish School. So while this is running, you can see that it's installing everything that it needs to do, and it will validate everything in between. And give it a few seconds for it to finish. It always takes longer when you're sharing live, right? Do we have any questions in between? I saw some chats.
Yeah, there's a question from Helma around using Bake and finding some problems within that. She abandoned the Bake file for now. It was possible to work out with. Is it possible to work out with one of you to figure out in an online session what's going on? Emails back and forth doesn't cut it. Of course, Helma. That's always an option. That's why we have our contact details here. Just plan a meeting with us, and we'd be happy to help you figure that out. We know you're one of our best users of Fire Terminal, so that's
yes.
That's really valuable feedback for us. Yeah.
In the meantime, it has completed the pipeline. So if I would go to my project again, I have now more profiles than I had before. I have 3 example profiles directly added to my Simplifier project already, which are transformed to actual Fire resources from the fish files I just uploaded to my GitHub. And that's the beauty of it. So all these links are on the slides where you can check out the these GitHub repositories which I showed, and you can create a local copy of it and make the adjustments where you want, and turn on any kind of validation or your sushi or not if you want it. You can also use it for quality control and to run all the validations before uploading it to Simplifier and go from there. I see.
Yeah, there's a question from Amenze, whether it can also do the reverse, like translate fish files to JSON artifacts. No, the other way around, sorry. JSON artifacts to fish files. I think that's something that's not currently in the pipeline, right? But there are tools available online. I think it's called GoFish, that you could indeed hook up and use for that. But it's currently not part of the Fire Terminal pipeline.
No, not in this pipeline, no.
And Vicky has a great question. Is this Fire Terminal pipeline limited only to fish files, or can we validate XML and JSON resources too?
Yeah, you take it.
Okay, great. No, it does both, Vicky. We just also hooked up Sushi if you want to use that, but there's no necessity to that. You can indeed, and actually that's super powerful. If you use quality control, for example, you can do regular validation, like is this a valid Fire resource? But you could even go as far as making your own custom validation rules, where, for example, within your organization, you have all agreed that in our case, like the name needs to be the same as the ID, or the title needs to be like, if you take the title but replace the spaces with dashes, then that's what the ID is going to be. These kind of rules are of course not Fire rules, but you can encode them with Firepath, and you can even check those on every commit. So it's actually indeed super powerful to use that also on XML and JSON files. Yeah, Matthijs is showing one of those custom rules right now. And that's something the Fire Terminal pipeline is already configured to use quality control. So you can just give it a name, like the minimal validation or the Acme validation in this case, to use for validation. There's a question from Helma. If I use Sushi for generating profiles from fish, a certain naming convention for the files is used. Do you use the same convention? Yeah, Helma, actually we just use Sushi under the hood. So anything Sushi does is also what we do here. We didn't make our own logic. And Ryan asked, can quality control also use a regex? Yeah, because it's Firepath under the hood, and Firepath can use regex within there. So you can get very creative, actually. I think that's all that's there now. So thank you,
Yep.
Matthijs. And I'll go
Back to
back
you.
to my screen here. Boom. Okay. Great. So let me cover a few new features on Simplifier. Few things that we worked on. I'm just going to cover these. These are all released already, so ready to use. Within quality control, well, I just mentioned quality control, but we added more validation for package dependencies also next to regular Fire validation. So this is getting more powerful all the time. So on here, let me go to one of my demo projects. I'm here on Simplifier. I'm going to Acme, which is my demo organization. Going to my Acme base project for R4. Quality control is here on the top. And every one of you will have at least the free rules. If you're a paying customer, you also have the minimal and recommended rules to do full Fire validation with one click. So if I hit the minimal rules here, it will start validating. And if I open the log here, you can see what it's doing. You don't need to look at the log. Eventually, all these issues will end up in your issues tab. But you'll see that it's speaking out here the rules that it's validating. So it's parsing Fire resources, it's doing Fire validation. So there's a few issues with my Fire resources here. But the important thing that I want to show is here at the end, once it gets closer to the actual checking the rules that are new here. So there's a few rules that you can see here that we added to the minimal file, minimal validation. So it's checking whether you actually have a package.json. It's checking that you don't have multiple of those. It's validating that the package.json is actually a valid file. And then it's also diving into your package dependencies. And here it will tell you, hey, there is a warning with, there's a newer version. Do you want to use this? But it could also spit out errors here where it says, hey, the package that you're using is actually a deprecated package or an unlisted package. So you should probably not use it anymore. These kind of things. So that's really powerful. And when you hit show issues, it will show them within your issues tab here. So you have a nice work list where you can go through and make sure that you resolve any of these issues. And you can also close them if you don't care about this specific issue. Speaking of dependencies, we're working on a new visualization. So what you're currently seeing is this list of dependencies. So you see, I've set a direct dependency on US core and the core Fire R4 package. But also have a lot of indirect dependencies, but it's not very clear right now where those come from. So we're working on more tree kind of overview here, where we say, okay, you have a direct dependency on R4 core and a dependency on US core, and this one has dependencies again on etc. So you see the entire tree of all the resources that are can be referred to within your project. So I think that's really powerful. It's something that we're bringing live later, and it also tells you the same information like, hey, there's a newer version of this specific package available for you to use. Okay. Then Matthijs, I see there's a question. Maybe you can have a look at that in the chat, but or in the Q&A. On implementation guides, another thing I want to show you is global variables. So you may have already seen that you can use variables now within your implementation guide. That's something that is recently added, that you can also do that on a global level. So if I go to the implementation guide here for Acme, and I go to the edit section, you can see that we have an index page here with some information. And we have different pages for different resources in here, like my page on Acme. And this is something we could already do in what we call the front matter of the Markdown page. We can put some variables, and then the variables like this can be used everywhere else within your resource. But sometimes, of course, there is a variable that you want to include in every page, like this is a link where you can find this and that, or this is like an extra version number that you want to see. There's multiple use cases for that. So if you want to do that, you can dive kind of underwater, and here hit this little octopus showing all files, even the hidden files that you normally don't need to look at. So we have some hidden files here, and once you have that open, you can also here with the plus add a file that will contain all your global variables. So if I add a global variable file, we already add one kind of default variable called greeting here. So now in any file that I have, like in the index file here, for example, I can just add with our little accolade widget. I type 2 of these accolades. I can do variable, and then here I can use the greeting variable that I just made there in the global variables. So now that greeting, hello world, is available within all of my pages. And you can also use this to set, for example, if you have a certain expansion level that you want your trees to have, you can do that at once with one global variable on top of the guide. So that's global variables. Another thing that we're adding, it's not completely finished yet, but is numbering. So you may have seen other guides with variables with numbering of all the pages and all the different headings within your guide sequentially. That's something we can add very soon as a setting on your implementation guide. I think it's probably right now, numbered headings. So numbered headings is something you can turn on and it's something we can use then. Yeah, so you don't need to do that manually anymore. Let's see. Then on FQL, few very powerful new things, and this is all documented also in the news section, or will be documented in the news section, so it's something you can come back later to. But FQL is our way to pull out a nice table, the Fire query language, to pull out a nice table to use in your implementation guide. And it's become a bit more powerful now, so you can use closure. So there's a statement using to allow you not just to query through files within your project, but also in all the dependencies that you saw from your project. And then the transpose view is something I can show quickly. So in, for example, here, my Acme base patient, you see that we have a little template that we use for our profiles here. So that's actually a hidden page, and it uses some FQLs, and that creates this little metadata table here. So this is nice, but I would actually prefer this if the whole table was like turned with 90 degrees. So if I show all the hidden pages, because that little template is a hidden page, I go to the profile template page, and here I have a little FQL statement that creates that table. And I can now say there are outputs, and we have a lot of different outputs for that, but one of them is now transpose. And once I've done that, I go back to my patient page here, it should show that our little table is now a vertical table rather than a horizontal table. So I think this looks a lot better for my metadata. We've added some other features, fields, functions that are really nice to help you create some links or help you figure out what are the different fields you can query on. And finally, on this section, I want to show you the new package pages. So going back to Acme, going back to Acme here, I go to the Acme organization, and now we've added a packages tab here. So normally you would only be able to find them from the individual projects, but now we have one place where you can find all the latest packages published by this organization. So that's one news tab. And then also if we dive into one of those packages, you can also see that we have a different visualization now for the packages. So they look a bit more like projects where you have an introduction here with release notes. So always try to fill in your release notes and your package descriptions nicely. We've added all the other things that you're familiar with, like dependencies and the history, on separate tabs. And there's also a little search feature now. So if I want to search in here, or let's say anything related to observations, we can do the same powerful search that we do on Full Simplifier also within a specific package. So that's now available to you. Okay. I see some questions coming in, but I'll get to them when we are done because we don't have a huge amount of time left. One thing I want to show you is the new validator. So I posted this on LinkedIn again before already. But we're adding more validators, and we're also adding the new .NET validator to Simplifier. I think this is super powerful. One place where we can see this, or will be able to see this, because this is currently on the staging server, not on the live server, that I'm going to show this. Here in the playgrounds, we have the Fire Validator. You're probably familiar with that. It's a really nice little tool. But this is something that we're making even more powerful. And I'm going to show that here with the validator. And actually, I can here turn on the new validator. So this is the new .NET validator that we're adding everywhere. And it's being written by our team that works on the open source .NET SDK. And it's a lot more powerful to find all kinds of issues. So many of you may have already been told, like, oh yeah, you get this error now, but it's a lot more clear in the new validator. So that's coming up soon. So a little demo that I gave in already online. If I want to write a patient, I can really just do that based on the feedback that the validator gives me. So if I start with just an empty, let's say, JSON file here, you see there's an error. Oh, you don't have a resource type property. Well, maybe you should add a resource type property. Resource property. So now I've added one, but it says, hey, you cannot add just the closing bracket directly after resource type. You need to have a colon there. So let's add a colon, and it probably expects here a little value. Okay, so I can add a value here, like a banana, and then it will tell me, but that's not a valid value for resource type. So I can quickly iterate in here and create a patient that I want. So now it says, oh, you need to have at least one value. So maybe I should add an ID value here. And then give the ID some value, maybe 1, 2, 3, and says, hey, you gave me a number, but I actually expected a string there. But now I can quickly make it a string, and then boom, we have a Fire resource. So I think this is super powerful, both the new validator and also bringing that live validation here in the playground, and also we're bringing that to the different places within Simplifier directly. And then the last thing that's coming up, I want to already show you this. These are networks of private packages, and this is something that we call package feeds. So right now, when you publish a package, you can choose whether it's public or whether it's private. But what we currently do not yet support is having private packages that build on other private packages. But this is something that's, of course, very powerful. It's something that many organizations want to use internally. And also, you may want to have an implementation guide that documents a private package. That's something we make available. The first use case is with private package feeds. So how this works, what I showed here on the right is a little overview of different packages within the package ecosystem. And some of them are published publicly, like the core Fire specification, the core US specification, some hypothetical core Dutch specification, and some other package. They're all public packages available in what we now call the main package feed. So if you go to packages.fire.org or registry.fire.org or anyone on Simplifier, you can find these packages and use them anywhere. But some other packages you want to have private, but in there also may be dependencies of private packages on public packages, but also other private packages on other private packages. Of course, if I want to give you access to this package, it doesn't make any sense if you don't have access to that package. So to guarantee that you actually have a full set of dependencies that can actually work together with each other, we developed these private package feeds where, in this case, the Acme organization can put both their private packages that depend on each other, but also the corresponding public packages within a package feed together. And we can make them available together as one entity. So I can give you access to the entire package feed so you can actually use them very effectively. And this is what's going to make possible to have indeed the private dependencies, and maybe also eventually an endpoint like packages.fire.org where you authenticate and then can get all the private packages that are relevant for you. This is coming. It's a rather complicated concept, so we try to hide it as much as possible when you don't need it. But this will make it possible to have private packages and distribute them not publicly, but only to the people that you want it. So again, if this is interesting to you, do reach out, and it's something we can work on together. Okay, we're getting very close to the hour. I just wanted to briefly show the roadmap, and then we open it for any questions that are still left. And of course, our contact details are also in there, so feel free to follow up later. So what you've already seen, Rob showed you these extensional elements in Forge. That's something we're currently working on. He's churning through that in all the different views and different possible extensions, and that will be available in the next release of Forge. Package feeds, I just showed you that. That's something we're making a first release of that, and hopefully allow you to build the neat packages on top of other private packages and have guides that document a private package in their scope. And then finally, that new validator that I also showed, we're going to make those available soon. Expect them later this quarter. And then other things that we're working on, single sign-on. Many large organizations would like to have single sign-on, and also multi-factor authentication is becoming more and more common. So that's something that we're adding to our enterprise solution. And then Matthijs already alluded to more Fire shorthand editing. So we have a nice cloud-based resource editor that we're working on. We try to also make a first release of that later this quarter. And the same is true for the official HL7 guide template that we've probably also shown before within this setting. So that's the roadmap I have for you right now, and that concludes what I have. So I'm opening it for Q&A. If anyone is dropping off already, feel free to do so. We have a next meeting in about 4 months around the next working group meeting. As I said, the recording and the slides will be shared, so you can use all those links, and you can contact us at these contact details. And anyone who may be already leaving, I thank you very much for being here. And otherwise, we stay around and answer any questions that you may have. Great. Matthijs, is there anything that's already waiting for an answer?
I have a question from Ryan May about the documentation tab on Simplifier on a resource level.
Yeah.
And the question is, can that be used to render the corresponding implementation guide page in that documentation part?
Yeah, that's something actually that we are working on to make that that connection between a resource and between the documentation, the page that documents it, way more clear. We don't have a date to announce there, but it is definitely something we're working on to tie those two together. Yes.
All right, and then
there are some questions on the Java validator.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You saw a little drop down there with the Java validator. It's something that we're running. Of course, we are a .NET based system, but we are running the Java validator within a little container. It's something that you can already use on your project. So via quality control, it's something I can help you set up. It is fully functional. It's just a bit slower than the .NET validator, which is not a dig on the Java validator itself. I'm not going to comment on whether that's slower or faster, but it's just we are in a .NET situation, so it's easier to run .NET tools than Java tools. But we do recognize like the validity of the Java validator, and especially also of the IG publisher. So we're putting that validation within the platform, so you can run them side by side. And again, yeah, Matthijs showed you the little pipelining in GitHub. They can also run both there if that's something you prefer. Let's see. Any other questions? If not, then I think this is a good place to close it. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being a Simplifier user, being a Simplifier customer. We really appreciate your feedback. You wouldn't know how hard it is to get some good feedback. So please do reach out if you have any questions, if you want to discuss something, how it works for you. We would really appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.